so-called flying saucers.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the SA. It's rotating.
Welcome to Kill the Stigma. Today we're going to be talking about Milabs. What does Milab mean? Military abductions. Now, just a little brief history. By the way, this is a very serious topic, so I'm going to keep it very serious today and not do the dumb thing I do sometimes. But this is, to me, more serious than like alien abductions, because this is human, dude. This is us doing this to our species. Okay, like, we in planet Earth think we're king and we do whatever you can think of to any other species. Fine, but betraying your own species? No, I'm not cool with that. So Milabs, their history started going back to the 50s. And they actually acknowledged this in this interview, but I'm not saying that because they acknowledge, because Lou Elizondo says it or Jim Semivan. I'm going with the literature. Carla Turner. Carla Turner was a brilliant ufologist, and she was a Dr. Carla Turner. I apologize, Dr. Carla Turner. And she wrote about this. She was an abductee. First, her husband started getting abductions, and that's how she got into the topic. She didn't understand, and then they both did. And she went down the rabbit hole, started interviewing a bunch of people, and then wrote about this whole Milab thing and died of a really rough cancer. One of those really quick cancers. Yeah, there's a lot of new information, but a lot of old information in this video, and it's all gold. So I encourage you guys to finish it, and it's all from, these people, like intelligence people. And some of it contradicts each other, which is very interesting. Here you go.
Okay, so where do we start?
Just for reference, and yeah, I switched it up because there was that sound in the background. It was kind of annoying me. I can handle the birds though. I gotta love them birds. So what they're talking about, what she's talking about, is Tim Burchett and the whole Matt Gaetz story. That there was some dude from the army that came in uniform and told him that there's a hybrid program with the military, that the military's cooperating. Something like that. A thing about DNA. And then Burchett also said that it's, people will become unglued if they knew the things that I know and the things that I have learned. So this is the context of how we got into this conversation. Let's go.
I'm going to hand this one over to you here. I'm speechless.
Sure. Well, first of all, I've had the privilege of speaking to Representative Tim Burchett and his colleagues, and what he's saying regarding access to very sensitive information, he's absolutely correct. Some of the people that briefed those individuals, I personally know. They were colleagues of mine back in the day. He's absolutely correct that some of the population, I think, would probably be potentially concerned about how much we know about this topic, and for several reasons. We can go into that. Now, as far as this notion of alien crossbreeding and hybridization, let me just preface this. When I was in the Pentagon at ATIP, I was a nuts and bolts kind of guy, so really airframe, air integrity, the material science and propulsion behind the vehicles themselves, not so much the occupants. But what Gaetz is referring to is something called, in the vernacular, it's known throughout kind of the UFO community as Milabs. And what it suggests is that there's been a long-standing agreement or understanding between us and our friends from out of town that have allowed us to work with whoever, whatever these are, in a cooperative agreement, and in exchange for that, supposedly they would have access to certain human specimens biologically in order to test. I have to say, first and foremost, I heard about that while I was at the Pentagon. I was not privy to the specifics of that. From my understanding, that relationship began, if it is true, began sometime in the 1950s, and has continued. I have met several individuals, former intelligence officers for the Air Force and other services, who swear by it, who actually say they've had encounters with UAP and have seen military personnel in and around the vehicles. And as if, very nonchalant, as if it was supposed to be. But what I will say is I've had plenty of individuals tell me verbatim that the military is far more, the military industrial complex is far more involved in this topic than anyone really knows. The cases which seem rather interesting, where you have in some cases UAP potentially being escorted by American fighter jets and allied fighter jets. So that would be a sense of cooperation maybe between us and whatever they are. I can't tell you for certain because simply I wasn't privy to that, if that indeed existed. But I will also say it's really not that far of a stretch if we were to come into contact with, let's say, just another nation, right? So let's look at it this way from a real perspective. There are tribes right now that are isolated in the Amazon and also in the South Pacific, and we have these no-go zones. Basically, we're not going to interfere with these indigenous people and their development because they've never had outside exposure.
So basically what he's saying there is that we're screwed. We're screwed. That every time an advanced civilization meets a less advanced civilization, what happens? You guys know. And you can think about the Aztecs, los conquistadores, all that stuff. So that's not good. It's not good for us, but apparently this is something I go back and forth with, and I was very skeptical lately of this deal that we hear about. Very skeptical. But now, I don't know. And it's not because of Lou, it's just that there's multiple people implying it, right? But I can't see an alien shaking freaking hands with Eisenhower, dude. But the Milabs stories, that's what they go like, oh, we took one to another underground base, and sometimes there is reports of even reptilians, bro, like things like that. Melinda Leslie's a good source for that. You can also go to the reality check. I think, well, I don't know, they did an episode on this. I think so. Some guy from Arizona that apparently they caught a picture of a soldier, unmarked uniform. So there's that. But yeah, this is insane. But let me keep showing you some interesting stuff.
And then you have the military abductions.
I was just going to ask about that. Milabs, military abduction.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who I respect very highly, Melinda Leslie, who was had a very dramatic experience with this. And
very dramatic and personal, very personal experience with this. I'm going to repeat it with all the respect to Melinda, from my understanding, and please correct me if my story is incorrect, because it is very sensitive. And for this, even though I don't usually care about talking about sensitive topics, this is different because this is a woman who's in a situation where some reptilian is trying to, and some soldiers there, and I don't know if it happened or not. I can't remember. I don't think so, but it was something along those lines.
And if you hear her story, you can tell, this is, I believe everything she says. I just don't know what the hell to do with it. And the problem with it is you don't know. I mean, you don't know. There's no context. There's no place to put it. It's like abduction scenarios. Where the hell do you put that? I mean, what branch of science or philosophy or psychology do you put that? It doesn't neatly fit into anything.
Right. Well, and so two things about that is one, which I found really interesting, because somebody that was talking a lot about Milabs, again, maybe I'm sorry about that. Yes, within their own framing of talking about the subject, which might be correct or incorrect, with Stephen Greer, was talking a lot about Milabs and his kind of version of what that is. But then what I found extremely interesting was, because we knew Dr. Stephen Greer had inside sources, maybe some good, maybe some bad. But then again, here comes Tom in the Secret Machines books with his own advisors, and the same kind of story about Milabs is coming out. So, when you have both kind of ends of the spectrum talking about it, it's very interesting.
Well, let's look at it this way. I mean, once again, there is you have to be very, very careful, and that's why I don't like to make any kind of determination one way or the other on what's real here. We have a consensus reality we all agree on, right? Because that's how we live our lives. We know, for instance, that our visual spectrum, our hearing spectrum.
So Jim says, basically, to conclude and kind of cut it shorter, he goes on about what we can see, what we can perceive, and all that kind of stuff. And then let's get back to Milabs here.
So here you are with, the Milabs stuff. And the problem with Milabs stuff that sticks with me is what you have to assume if Milabs are true is just a bridge too far for me. I believe that the experience is accurate. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think that it is, quote unquote, our military doing this. The logistics behind these Milab abductions would entail military units, tons of money, people changing. I mean, people that work there, they can't work there forever. You can't just be this 19-year-old kid, get indoctrinated into this quote unquote Milab thing, and then you work the thing and go. It doesn't make any sense. There are generals, colonels, all these captains, infrastructure that would have to be there, military bases, technology that would allow you to do different things. People, were supposedly taken to military installations and things along those lines, people in uniforms, and nobody says anything. There's no, where would you do?
So I agree with that. No one says anything. Nobody. Unless the fear. You don't know what it's like to have, if let's say hypothetically speaking, you have an alien boss that's reptilian. I'm not trying to mess with no reptilians, man. But it saddens me. I hope that's not true, dude. I really hope that's not true. Now, another thing he says, the infrastructure, the cost, it would be huge. But, what if the infrastructure is not ours? What if it's theirs, right? And they provide that. And purpose of that, I don't know. Is this still going on? I don't hear many stories anymore. But I don't know if it's because the topic of abductions and all that has been kind of left out there because we want disclosure for the people, and it's almost like sacrificing the people that have actually struggled with this, because it won't be taken seriously for how unbelievable it gets. And this goes with psionics, and things are gonna get weird, bro. The woo, and there's a line there, right? And I don't know exactly where that line is, but there's a point that I get skeptical. But yet there's another point where I'm like, yeah, things are get weird. There's a psychic connection that I don't understand. Remote viewing, all that stuff. I believe it's real. But now let's go back to Milabs. This goes back to, what about black helicopters? Black unmarked helicopters that have been seen. I hate talking about me. I really don't. My most viewed episode was the one where I talk about, the first time I talked about mystery drones, or second, I don't know, you can look it up. It's got 2.8K views. It blew up and I got so uncomfortable because it was very personal for me, but like, black unmarked helicopters. And this topic goes, like I said, very personal to me, because for me, things have slowed down. The only time I see something now is when there's a drone flap, which doesn't seem to be anymore. And I don't even know if those are legit UFOs. I think they are, though. Anyways, but every time I'm with my ex, I see something. And we had 2 kids together. And we would see stuff all the time. And not only UFOs, but unmarked helicopters. And that's a part of the story. The whole thing that happens with cattle. You can go back in history and like the black helicopters were as common as seeing unidentified objects. Why? Who is flying that? What is their operation? I don't know. Not sure.
Black one, you gotta be kidding. The first time we're getting this is insane. I cannot.
Wait, I can't see it. Fuck, I can't see it, dude.
I saw it.
No. Whatever, I just wanted to add there. I'm not even going to include the whole video just for context, but here's a few videos of my past. And when I hang out with my ex, so what do I have, like if I decide to hang out with my ex right now, that's what would probably, it's strange and it kind of freaks me out. But like I said, things have been very slow for me since we're not, and for her too. So what's that about? For real. Black, it's like all the way black, right over my house. Constant shit, dude, constant. Chinook. What the fuck is a Chinook doing by my house? Like, why is she Chinook? Don't fly over me, bro. Don't fly over me. Dude, what's a Chinook helicopter? Unmarked? I don't see any numbers. Nope, there's no numbers. It's blacked out. That Chinook is back, dude. You hear those blades? Can't really tell. Yeah, it looks pretty big. I don't know, dude. I don't know what the fuck is going on.
And it also assumes that there is a extremely corrupt, highly illegal cabal out there.
Well,
doing these things, and for what purpose? In other words, you're being used by our own government for what nefarious purpose? I don't see that. Having worked in the government for 32 years, I mean, you can see something like an MK Ultra, and you can look at that and you can say,
in that same interview, this is before they started talking about Milabs, he got asked this though.
Yeah, and the last question about the legacy programs is just would it be possible they had like a legacy program that involved either contact or UAPs and psychic phenomenon?
Yeah, it'd be possible. Yeah. I would be surprised if they didn't.
Right.
There have also been some claims that, certain abduction events or sightings have been perpetrated by the United States military and not by, the whatever extraterrestrials or other beings. What are your thoughts on that? Is there any potential truth to that?
Wow. I'm probably not ready to go there yet. Let me share this with you. Any government who conducts experiments on its people without their knowledge, without their permission, is the enemy. And let me be very clear with that. Any government, and by the way, we have done that in the past as a government. My country here has done that. We had things like the MK Ultra experiments where we provided LSD unknowingly to people, and some of them actually died as a result, going into a psychotic state. The Tuskegee experiments, where we allowed the people, namely African Americans, to suffer from syphilis to its natural end, which is death. We allowed that to happen. We actually, even though we had a cure for it, we allowed these fellow Americans to die simply in the name of science. That is repulsive. It is repugnant. And that is, dare I say, when governments do that, they need to be fearful of something much greater. Because if once the people find out, it's like being stuck in a telephone booth with a sleeping gorilla. That gorilla's sleeping, but make no mistake, when the people find out, and i.e. in this analogy, the people are the gorilla, they will rip you apart. They will. This only works, this idea of democracy in our government, because people have faith and confidence in its institutions. The moment that the government deceives and betrays the American trust, then it's got a very significant issue on its hand, because if people know how to deal with that, and there's a history of human beings dealing with situations like that. And so it terrifies me. I don't want to ever think my government could or would do that to other human beings, but we have in the past. So we can't discount it entirely. I like to think that there's no one that I know in the government that would ever do that. I certainly would never do that. It's anti-American. It's anti-democracy. And I would never, if I was even privy to something like that, I wouldn't tolerate it. If you think I'm being loud now by blowing the whistle on UAPs, you just wait. If it turns out that our government has been doing that to other people. Now, with that said, I can't entirely discount it, and there's reasons for that. Which at some point I may be prepared to address. There's information that is forthcoming, I think, in the not too distant future, that may substantiate that maybe there were elements in our government that were doing things that were not very ethical. One thing is to experiment on a human being if they allow it and they volunteer for it. But if you do it with people unsuspecting, or worse, with children, then I've got a significant issue with that. If you look at Army regulations, even on the Army side of the Department of Defense, we have procedures for doing intelligence work. And one of those is what they call questionable intelligence activities involving human experimentation, as Procedure 13 violation. There's prohibitions for doing that. You can't do it, because why? Well, in the past we did, and we got caught and we got in trouble for it, right? When I say we, not me, I wasn't part of those, but organizations that I belonged to in the past, they did those type of things. And so Congress passed laws saying you can't do this anymore. My hope is that that's the case, that no one is coloring outside the lines and doing some sort of human experimentation. Again, I know I'm not answering your question directly, because you're talking about, the term psionics and CE5 and all these other terms, people, words du jour, names du jour that we give to things that people are trying to do. But, the government has a long history of doing things and being involved in this topic, particularly UAP. And I wouldn't be overly surprised if in the future we learn that, yeah, maybe we were involved in doing some things that were ethically not very good.
Yeah, and that concludes it. But unfortunately, we all know the government will do anything in the name of national security. Have a good one.